Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. If everyone could please rise to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'll ask the interim secretary to read the public notice.
Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Number one, application 23-10P, Cusson Automotive Enterprises, LLC, request for a zone change of 9.92 acres of land from general commercial to industrial for property located at 753 John Fitch Boulevard. Our second item is a continuation of a public hearing for a PZC-sponsored text amendment. This has been continued from March 14th and March 28th. Copies of these applications are on file in the office of the town clerk and/or the planning department and online at www.southwindsor-ct.gov/planning/department. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Bart Passaconis, Chairman, Planning and Zoning.
Okay, thank you very much. A little housekeeping. We have a few commissioners out tonight, so I'm going to seek Commissioner Carey for Commissioner Wagner. And if anyone has a cell phone, if they could, please put it to vibrate or shut it off. We would appreciate it. Our order of business tonight will be first, we'll hear from our applicant, then we will hear from our town staff, then we will hear from members of the public. First, those in favor, and then those against or having questions or concerns, and then we will hear from commissioners. Do we have someone here to represent the applicant? If there's anyone who would like to speak tonight, when you come up to the podium, please make sure your microphone's on. There's a sign-in sheet next to the right of the podium as you're facing it. And you can put your name and address and introduce yourself to the commission.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jay Ursary. I'm a land surveyor and principal with the firm of J.R. Russo and Associates in East Windsor. We are here this evening representing Cusson Enterprises, LLC, for this zone change application that you have before you. Also here with me is Don Cusson of Cusson Automotive, Steve Deline, who is the property owner whose family owns the parcel that we're talking about, that's the subject of the application, and some other folks here who are in support that I think you'll probably hear from in a few minutes. So,
could you maybe just raise your microphone or move it a little closer to you?
Is that better?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Probably I'm too tall. Maybe I just need to bend over a little bit. So, as I said, this is an application for a zone change. The property is located at 753 John Fitch Boulevard. And if you like, I brought some handouts because I'm kind of old school and I have paper. So I made a copy of the GIS aerial, which maybe gives you a little better feel for exactly where we are here rather than the zone change map. So I'll hand that out.
I believe we each received a copy of the aerial
in
our
this
package.
Okay, perfect. So you're up. Okay, so you're way ahead of me then. So John Fitch Boulevard, the area that we're talking about here is on the west side of John Fitch. We're just south of Mascolo Road. The present Cussin Automotive is located on Mascolo Road and borders this property on the north side. The bordering properties on John Fitch are A&S Boats, which takes up the majority of it, and just to the north or the northeast corner of this parcel is bordered by the McDonald's restaurant that fronts on John Fitch. The property has frontage located between the McDonald's restaurant and A&S Boats. There's 102 feet, if I remember correctly, of frontage, which is the access to this parcel from John Fitch. So the total parcel area is 9.9 acres. It's currently in the general commercial zoning designation, and we're looking to have it changed to the industrial zone. Properties to the south are zoned general commercial. The properties to the north, which is the Mascolo Road properties, are all zoned industrial. And the properties to the west, which actually front on Main Street, these are long, narrow agricultural parcels, are zoned A40. So in your zone change requirements in your regulations, there's a number of things that you ask us to take a look at, and they're basically some approval considerations or conditions that you're asked to look at when you look at one of these zone change applications. They revolve around your POCD. Is this in compliance with your POCD? And I think probably you all have seen some of these before on Route 5, and the POCD is in favor of additional commercial industrial type development on Route 5 or to the rear of Route 5. And when you look at your current zoning map, you see that most of the general commercial actually fronts right on Route 5. General commercial being probably more lended to things like personal service, A&S Boats, where you've got retail sales, restaurants. There's a few restaurants, obviously, on Route 5. Stores, I think there's some liquor stores probably on Route 5, if I remember correctly. So the general commercial zone tends to lend itself more to personal service type things versus the industrial being located generally to the rear of these GC zones. That's typically what you see along the westerly side. A little different on the east side, directly across the street from these properties, everything is zoned industrial on the east side of Route 5. So when we look at the approval considerations in the terms of the POCD, and I think you have a memo in your packets that my partner Tim Kuhn put together, which is some of the supporting documentation for this particular zone change. And he talks about the POCD, and this change from general commercial to industrial is in compliance with your POCD. It does talk about that and talks about promoting more commercial industrial growth within the Route 5 corridor. It talks about suitability of the land. In this particular case, as I said, general commercial, typically having roadway frontage on Route 5. This parcel has 100 feet, and it really was left that way, I think, for a roadway access to get into the back. If this zone change is approved and we move forward, it's not our intention to use that access. Cussin Automotive is located currently on Mascolo Drive. They've been there for 30 years. They'd like to expand the business. That's the reason for this. And we would be accessing from Mascolo into this piece. It's not the intention right now to use that access out to John Fitch Boulevard. Utilities would come through there. As you know, one of the zone change things that we need to look at is, do we have suitable utilities to allow for the industrial use? And here we have everything. We've got sewer, water, gas, electric. It's all available on Route 5, and it'll all be brought in to the site through this 100-foot access that we have out to Route 5. Again, looking at the suitability of the land, when we talk about the general commercial, it really doesn't have any frontage where you could have a building that would face Route 5, any type of a personal service or anything like that. It's simply an access, so it wasn't really set up to be general commercial with frontage on Route 5. In terms of the infrastructure, I just mentioned that. All infrastructure is available here to support this change. There's no impacts. Traffic is one of the things that you need to look at. And Tim took a look at the IT manual in terms of traffic generation. And typically what we found is that mostly when we look at your general commercial zone and we start thinking about personal service, maybe a restaurant, something like A&S Boats, where you have more of the public coming to the site on more of a regular basis, a lot of in and out. You know, somebody's coming in, maybe they buy something, they leave. Versus the industrial zone, you don't typically have the general public visiting the industrial site, a lot of coming and going. Workers come in the morning, they work for the day, they go home in the evening. So when we look at those manuals, it's talked about in here under traffic impacts. We generally see that the industrial zone would typically generate less impact than the general commercial zone, so we don't anticipate any impacts. With regard to property values, general health, safety, and welfare, again, we don't expect that this is going to have any effect on that. There's not a whole lot of difference between a lot of the uses that are actually in your zoning table. And I actually took a look at your regulations in Article 4, commercial industrial zones, and the permitted uses. And when you look at general commercial and you look at industrial and you go down the columns and you look at all the different uses, and there's a number of them, and I counted them up, there's 65 different uses that are allowed either in general commercial or in the industrial zone. But then when you go through and you look at it a little closer, you're going to find that 22 of those uses are allowed in either zone. Could be general commercial, could be industrial. So when we start thinking about looking at impacts and what impact this zone change might have, when you consider the fact that 22 of those uses are allowed in either zone, about 34% roughly of what is allowed, we don't really see where there's going to be any impact. Again, Cussin Automotive is looking to develop this piece to expand their business, and he's not a high traffic generator. People come in, they drop off a vehicle for service or a truck for service. May be there for a day, may be there for 2 days, may be there for 3 days. When it's finished, they come back and pick it up. So there's not a lot of in and out. And there's probably some parts delivery and that type of thing, but it's not a big traffic generator. But also knowing that you have to think about what other uses could go here. And again, when we look at this, we find that a lot of the uses are similar and a lot of the uses are allowed in any zone. So I've got copies of this. If you all would like to have it, I'm going to submit one for the record. But I think it's important to take a look, and really when we look at this, we find that there's really not a whole lot of difference between general commercial and industrial in terms of uses and a lot of the considerations that you need to think about in terms of a zone change.
Yeah,
approval.
if you brought copies of that, if you could pass out one for each commissioner, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Just watch your step there. Fair enough, thank you.
So it's kind of interesting to look at as I was going through this today in the office, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going back and forth, and that's when I actually realized that, you know, there are a number of uses here that, you know, would be allowed in any zone. But really the reason for the zone change is the auto repair, which is what Cussin Automotive does, is not allowed in the general commercial zone. He's in the industrial zone. As I said, he's been there for 30 years. He's expanded once already. He's out of space. This property is available, and he would like to expand his business and stay right here in South Windsor, where he's been for the last 30 years, and hopefully continue to grow. So I think, you know, that's a basic overview of the application. The zone change plan that you have in front of you actually, shows you the location. The topography is relatively level on the site until we get to the right back property line. Then it drops off down towards the areas to Main Street. It drops off fairly quickly. It's very sandy soils. It's going to be conducive to a storm drainage system where we can provide some infiltration back into the groundwater. So we see it as a site that won't be too difficult to develop in terms of the Cusson Automotive use, and we're really looking forward to hopefully getting an approval this evening, if you could find it so, to do that, so we could continue on our way. We're aware that you're considering some zoning changes which might affect this, so we would certainly be happy if we could leave this evening with an approval from you all and be able to move forward with our site plan and get before you as quickly as we can with a site plan application to move this whole thing forward. So that concludes my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I think I could answer them. At this point, I think Don Cusson would like to just give you a few words, and if you have any questions specific to his business and his operation, certainly he could answer those.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Jay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Don Cusson, owner of Cusson Automotive, located at 29 Mascola Road. I'd first like to thank the board for their commitment to the number of endless hours that go unseen by most of the South Windsor public. I've always thought of the P&Z Commission as an independent business within the town that needs to know and understand the business world's needs, as well as the homeowners' concerns about the town's growth. I'm here tonight for two reasons. First, I thank the board for listening to the small business community regarding the new zoning changes that have resonated throughout the town. To not fall into the big box warehouse zoning rules that are vitally important and understood by all. This town was established by independent and small business. Our business started in South Windsor 30 years ago this June. One of the new zoning changes moving forward is new automotive requirements that new facilities would have to be located on industrial property only. I'm here in front of the public and the board tonight to hear of our request for a needed zoning change from general commercial to industrial. We're looking to purchase a parcel of land located at 753 John Fitch Boulevard that has been barren for some 45 years. This property is a conforming lot located behind A&S Boat and McDonald's. The property is surrounded by all commercial businesses on Mascola Road and Route 5. The back of the property is adjacent to some 100+ feet wide of wetland that parallels the whole western side of the base of a 25-foot embankment. We're looking to erect a building on the property that can support our growing commercial business that exists from within South Windsor and surrounding towns. Since this property purchase endeavor began last June, I've been under contract and have spent thousands of dollars required to do my due diligence to include the financial institutions and now the town's unexpected requirements in the changes. January, we found out that we would be required to have a zoning change to industrial per upcoming regulations. So my second request, since I started this endeavor last June, we're going to request one thing. The conversation with South Windsor Planning for the past 10 months has been talked about. I would ask that the committee recognizes and allows my project to move forward under the current or old regulations in respect to building setback requirements, along with other possible unknown changes that I don't know about. Lastly, as our world changes for all, so does the town of South Windsor have to change. One example of change, the population growth within this town. The schools have had to grow both physically along with added administrative support. This is just one aspect of town growth that costs taxpayers thousands of dollars. I'm saying this because everybody wants quality education. The Board of Ed is the largest bucket of money that requires constant attention. School buildings aren't free to build or maintain. Are the townspeople willing to realize a rather large tax increase this year? I say this because there must be a balance of business in town that can help offset these needed service costs. We do not want to ignore the health of our current businesses, nor create an environment that makes possible for new businesses to look elsewhere. The town cannot say they are closed for business. I go back to my opening comments. The planning and zoning is like a small business. They need to understand the needs and balance of our income and expenses constantly. I thank you, I thank the board and the people of South Windsor for listening to me tonight, respectfully. If there's any questions you guys would like to ask of me, I'm more than willing to listen and answer.
Okay, we will get to that, but for right now, since your presentation's completed, we're going to turn to our town staff, Jeff Folger, for planning comments.
Okay, I have some comments that Michelle Leip has drafted concerning this application. This is a request for a zone change from general commercial zone to industrial zone for approximately 9.93 acres on the westerly side of Route 5 and southerly of Mascola Road. The site is adjacent to industrially zoned land to the north, and there is a combination of industrial and commercial uses in the area. The minimum lot size in the general commercial zone and industrial zone are 30,000 square feet. Frontage requirements for both zones is 100 feet. The primary difference in bulk requirements are setbacks. Industrial zone has a 35-foot front yard setback and 25-foot rear yard setback for structures. The general commercial zone has a 50-foot front yard setback and 15-foot rear yard setback. The lot coverage ratios are different as well. 50% lot coverage allowed in industrial zones and 30% in GC zones. Impervious coverage is the same in both zones, allowing 65%. The possible uses in the general commercial zoning are more geared to retail and service uses, whereas the industrial zoning category includes manufacturing, offices, warehouses, distribution centers, general contracting establishments, automotive repairs, etc. The town plan designates this area for economic development and encourages keeping industrial land so that it can accommodate today's businesses. In acting upon the zone change, the Commission shall consider the various factors favorable and unfavorable to such change, including, but not limited to, the goals, objectives, and recommendations of the Plan of Conservation and Development, the purposes of zoning and of these regulations, changes that have taken place in the rate and pattern of development and land use within the town and adjoining communities, the supply of land available in the present and proposed zone, the physical suitability of the land for the proposed zone, the impact on the capacity of the present and proposed utilities, streets, drainage systems, and other improvements, the general character and zoning of the neighborhood, and impacts on the surrounding area. That concludes her comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please step forward.
Hi, I'm Steve Delane. Delane Flooring has been in South Windsor for, 65 some odd years. I could be off on that, but I wasn't around when they moved there. My dad bought the property back in the 80s, late 80s, and developed or parceled out the McDonald's. The whole goal was that Route 5 at that point in time was going to be the retail spot, but then it moved over to Buckland, right? Not knowing he had passed by then. We've been paying taxes on a regular basis and based on that land value. And I think that the right person to buy this is certainly Cussin Automotive. They're going to do a great job. They've been in town for 30 years. Their reputation is terrific. So I am definitely in support of it, and would like to see that go.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you sign in?
Oh, right.
Right here.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Please step forward.
Good evening. For record, Peter DeMalley. I'm CEO of Design Professionals, an 18-person consulting practice here in town. We've been in business in South Windsor the entire 37 years. I'm speaking here not as a paid on behalf of any client tonight. I'm here because I'm a customer of Cussin Automotive, and I know and trust Don and his staff very well. Let me first talk to you as an urban planner, a thought on this. General commercial zone is generally for those uses that need visibility from the highway or principal arteries in town. This is a back piece. It's cut off from visibility by the A&S boat and McDonald's. You don't see it. It's really not the type of site where you'd put a gas station, which is allowed in general commercial zone, or some of the other uses, a restaurant perhaps. I think it's the ideal situation. They're real tight over on Mascola Road. Cussin Automotive needs it. They're a great business, and I think we should support them, and I think it makes absolutely makes sense to change it to the industrial zone from general commercial zone. And as Jay Ushery indicated, and I agree with his comments, he indicated that a lot of the uses in industrial and general commercial are similar, so it's not a dramatic change from one to the other, but it makes absolute sense to me because it's not highly visible. The tract is not highly visible from a highway, and it's contiguous to other industrial land, and they've run out of land on Mascola Road for virtually every business enterprise over there. So, I'd like to mention something about Don, though, why I'm a customer of his. We got hit by the theft ring that's been going around stealing catalytic converters just over a year ago, and Don and his staff dropped everything to accommodate us. We got our vans up on the road that week. He was able to secure the catalytic converters, repair our vehicles, and get us up and operating in just a few days. It was like unheard of because there's such a demand for new catalytic converters because of all the theft that's going on. So he was fantastic on that, and the staff did a great job. We've used him for other services on our commercial vehicles as well. But another situation is we bought a couple of new GMC vans from a dealer. One of those vehicles that we use every day was having problems with its brake system. We kept having to bring it back to the dealer and then back again. They couldn't fix it. We went over to Don, and he and his staff diagnosed it exactly, fixed it then and there, and we're up and operating. We've never had to be back, and it's been, I think, a couple of years now. They are really good people. They're local people. They've been around, would say, 30 years, and I think we should support this local business enterprise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application for zone change? Please step forward.
Good evening. Bear with me, missing half my voice today. So anyway, Mark Duclos with Century Commercial. I own Century Commercial. We're a Hartford-based commercial real estate services company, brokerage, property management, construction management. I'm just going to make it really quick. We started representing Don back in 1993 when he opened shop, and so we've been proud to call him a client for all 30 years. And when we bring people to town, we love to see those companies grow. And we not only like to see companies grow, we love to see great companies grow, and kind, caring, quality human beings that run these companies. So all for growth in South Windsor. So I'm obviously very much for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this zone text amendment? Zone change text amendment?
Good evening, Steve Gretsch, South Windsor, resident. This makes absolute sense, right? Putting a building where other buildings are. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak against or?
No. Actually, I would like to be positive and speak in favor. I find myself in a strange position here, and I do want to say that this is entirely unplanned.
If you could introduce yourself?
Yep, and I am actually signed in as number 2 already. I have learned one thing of coming here to sign in. We've also used Donnie to use our vehicles as well, and he's a wonderful person. I think this is a good use of the land here. The only concern I have is the phrasing that I think I heard about, please allow this to come in under the previous regulations. That's where I would wonder if that's not opening a precedent for other businesses and other companies to be able to say, I planned this before the new regulations were passed and came in, and therefore I'd like to have a grace period coming in. So although I think this is wonderful, and I think you're wonderful, and not that this would be a situation where that would be abused at all, I would be concerned that if we start allowing businesses to be grace perioded into these things, that may have longer reaching repercussions that we wouldn't like.
Okay, could you please state your name for the record?
Jessica Vogelsang, I'm from Hilton Drive, South Windsor.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak against or have questions or concerns they'd like to express? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none, I will turn to commissioners. Pardon me. We have a few letters to read into the record. I'll ask our interim secretary, who's doing a wonderful job, to read any in favor first.
There are 3 in favor.
Okay.
I'll read those first. First one's from Lloyd Ferenc, who's president of Schlepp Right 1 on Kennedy Road. To whom this may concern, it has been brought to my attention that Cusson Automotive is purchasing some property located on John Fitch Boulevard. I am a business owner operating out of a depot on Kennedy Road in South Windsor. My company, Schlepp Right 1 Incorporated, has over 30 commercial vehicles registered in Connecticut and paying property tax in South Windsor. I met Don Cusson over 2 years ago when I was just starting my business. I needed a vehicle service facility that could handle my fleet of delivery vehicles. Cusson Automotive has been a critical partner for my business and allowed me to double my fleet size in less than 2 years. It is my primary shop for all vehicle service and repair. I would not have been able to grow as quickly without their ability to service my fleet. They keep my vehicles running safely. I understand that Don is purchasing some property on John Fitch Boulevard to expand his service center. I support his endeavor and respectfully recommend the town supports him as well. I plan to keep growing in South Windsor, and I need Cusson Automotive to be able to keep up with my fleet needs. Again, from Lloyd Ferenc, president of Schlepp Right 1. The next one is from Andrea Bolio. She is the managing member of Progressive Sheet Metal on Mascola Road. We are in complete support of the expansion of Cusson Automotive. We are neighbors of Cusson and have seen the growth of his business, and he is in need of more land to expand. Cusson is a tremendous asset to the neighborhood as well as the town of South Windsor. Sincerely, Andrea Bolio. Board members of Planning and Zoning. This is from David Cook, president of David Cook Plaster Company at 647 Sullivan Ave. It has been brought to my attention that Cusson Automotive, located here in town, will be asking for a zoning change to allow them to expand their business. Don Cusson and company have been servicing our equipment for over 25 years. Don and his crew are some of the most responsible group of employees we have ever worked with. They have handled every need for vehicle service, from our shuttle vans to our heavy-duty plaster trucks. We support Cusson Automotive's efforts in every way to allow them the zone change that is required for their growth. And then I have one that has concerns. This is from Hartford Audubon Society. Dear Chairman Pasaconis, P&Z Commissioners, and Town Planner Lipe, I am writing on behalf of the Hartford Audubon Society, which is a vibrant, all-volunteer conservation organization in Hartford County. We own and manage the Hartford Audubon Society Nature Preserve at 621 Main Street, known as Station 43. The preserve is located in the Connecticut River floodplain and is one of the most productive inland bird watching sites in Connecticut. It is also a special focus area of the Silvio Conte National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. 10 endangered, 9 threatened, and 9 special concern bird species have been reported there among 229 total bird species. Station 43 comprises 9.1 acres of shallow pond and marsh, bordered by over 400 acres of wetland, meadows, and active farmland on our south, west, and north boundaries, and by 100 acres of wooded higher ground to the east. The trail entrance for the property is directly opposite where Newberry Road intersects with Main Street. We are writing to express our concern about the proposed zone change on the 9.9 acres in application 23-10P submitted by Cussin Automotive Enterprises. We are concerned since an industrial development on this property would have the potential to increase stormwater drainage and pollution from a future industrial development on the property. Our land and the extensive and critical wetland habitat of the Connecticut River floodplain are downstream of this property. Hartford Audubon asks that you carefully consider any land use changes on this property with regard to their future potential environmental adverse impacts. We understand that this is only a zone change at this time, but want to elevate the serious environmental impacts that development on this land may have on the residents, wetland, watercourses, and wildlife of the town and state. We thank you for your careful review of this application. Annette Pasek, President of Hartford Audubon Society.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll turn to our commissioners. Commissioner Viteri.
Thank you. The only comment I have, it's just having exited McDonald's on Muscala Road, if your traffic increases enough, anybody trying to exit Muscala and going north, I think might be something that's something to be considered. But that's probably once you're going to actually come up with an increased use. But that would be the one concern I have over this. Otherwise, the rest of it seemed fine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. I don't have any comments or concerns, which I think for me is quite rare. I will say my only comment really is this is what we want to see. Small businesses expanding their presence in South Windsor. Other than that, I don't have any concerns, so I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Foley.
I think this is a good use of the land, although on the comment as far as going with the new regulations, I would favor going with our new regulations. It's what the hard work was put in for and makes sense. As far as the Audubon Society, I'm sure that Mr. Cussin and his team with Russo, that there's regulations for oil separators and all sorts of the preparations they'll take with Jeff and engineering and whatnot, so I have no objections.
Okay. Commissioner Dexter.
I agree with Kevin. I think it's a good use of the land. It's surrounded by a lot of industrial and commercial, and we always say we don't want to lose industrial. For a change, we're actually making industrial, so that's a positive. And I think that because it's just a zone change tonight, the application, when it comes forward, we talk about traffic and things, then we'll have a little bit more to say, but I think it's a good use of the land.
Okay, Commissioner Carey.
I agree. I think it's a good use of the land, and the town people have come and talked about it and all been very, very positive. We didn't hear any negative comments whatsoever, so I think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. And now for me. I do like the use of the land. I do like the change from general commercial to industrial, as we don't have much industrial land that hasn't been developed. other than a few pockets here and there. So it is important for our industry to grow the tax base in South Windsor. Concerns about the wetlands and Station 43, but again, that would be more down the road with any application. Just as far as whether it'll be under the new regulations or the old regulations, Jeff, I believe that'll depend on when the application is submitted, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that's totally up to the applicant of when you get your application in. If it's submitted after the new regulations are in, it'll be under the new regulations. That's all I have for comments. Commissioners, is there any reason to leave this public hearing open? Town staff?
No.
Is the applicant have any other input?
No comments at this time.
Okay. Then we will close the public hearing at 7:42, and we'll move into our next order of business. The Kusan is on our agenda for action later tonight. Okay, our next public hearing is the continuation of the PZC-sponsored text amendment regarding the moratorium, warehouses, distribution center, and everything that was on the agenda and has been discussed the past couple public hearings. So I will turn to our town staff and see if there's any update for a report.
No, at this time, there's no update on the report.
Okay. Then I will turn to members of the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the PCC-sponsored text amendment? Please step forward. Mr. Damali?
I've already signed in, so I gather I don't have to do it again. Again, for the record, Peter Damali, I'm President and CEO of Design Professionals, offices at 21 Jeffrey Drive. I'm not going to reiterate my comments from prior hearings. May mention one or two, but for the most part, I want to concentrate on new information. First of all, and we learned last time about perhaps some unintended consequences. I'll leave that to you to make the decision, but we found out that if you have a large industrial use such as a distribution center and any part of the property abuts any residential zone, whether it's way in the back or on the side or whatever, that those uses are not, that were conforming uses when they're approved by this commission would no longer be conforming uses, it become non-conforming uses. And if they want to expand their operation, and there are a number of them within 500 feet, their property line, within 500 feet of residential, I can mention a few later, but if they want to expand their building, whether it's their offices or a freezer space or dry warehouse storage space, what have you, any increase requires they secure a special exception. However, because they abut or within their premises, this perimeter of their property is within 500 feet of a residential zone, that was not the case, didn't matter when they first went in and got approved by the commission or expanded. Because of that fact, they could not get a special exception until after they got a Zoning Board of Appeals variance. I think that's patently unfair, and I think it's going to, once these guys find out about it, they're not going to be happy if the regulation is not changed before you implement it. So there are a number of them, and I'll go through some of them, that are in that situation, who invested, some of them tens of millions of dollars in this town, creating lots of jobs, and almost all of them are top 25 taxpayers in town. So if you don't change that to make it somehow, and I don't know how you exactly do it to make it reasonable for them, and I'll suggest a change right tonight, but I think you need to think about what you can do with respect to those businesses that have been paying taxes in the town, employing people in this town, and we welcome them as new businesses in this community, and they've invested sometimes over and over again in their facilities, and then that they cannot expand at all unless they get a zoning board of appeals variance and a special exception when today they are permitted use. You need to think about that unintended consequences. So, so distribution centers, for example, also, let me start in some categories here. First one is in the I-291 corridor development zone. So if you apply that, the way it reads in your February draft, February 3rd, 2023 draft, any distribution center or warehouse, whatever you want to call them, in the I-291 corridor development zone, which is within 500 feet of a residential zone, cannot expand at all without getting a special exception, and first they got to get a variance based on the way the regulations read. So if you look at the I-291 corridor development zone, that means Coca-Cola on the east side of Route 30. They're far less than that distance to residential zone to the north as you're approaching Chapel Road. So if they want to put on any kind of expansion, they'd have to first go to ZBA for hardship, and then they go for a special exception and site plan approval from this commission. I think you need to think about that. Amazon across the street, across Route 5, is also, it's residential across Route 5 within 500 feet of their facility, and I know they're getting active. I've heard that from town staff. They're going to be opening apparently. And then you've got the Home Depot. It's also within 500 feet if you go across Route 5. So food for thought. Perhaps all of it in those uses in the corridor development zone, which is south of Chapel Road, be exempt from this provision. It's an area of the overlay zone. I mean, you know, any use, commercial, industrial, which fits those criteria in there, are allowed. They've already been allowed by this commission, and I think you should consider that within the corridor development zone, that they're exempt from the provisions of that particular part of it. That they have to be a special exception, and they'd have to get a zoning variance in order to even apply to you. I think it's patently unfair for them to have to go to zoning board of appeals and argue that they have a hardship when it was created by the commission and not by them. Second thing is existing distribution centers. I discussed it with Michelle Leip last week. Some possible modification to the proposed draft you might want to consider. And that may be to allow, the use does not become a special exception use and doesn't have to observe those 500-foot setbacks. It'd be by right as it is today for the first 20% of expansion. If they go over that, then I suppose it would apply. But you got to allow them to do something. An office, one of the buildings in those large buildings has a sizable office component. They're handling all in New England and parts of New York State. If they wanted to do a 5,000 square foot expansion, they couldn't do it based on what we heard at the last hearing. So I think you might want to confer with the town attorney with respect to that, how it would apply under what circumstances. But what we heard at the first two hearings was that they could not do anything without a special exception, and if they're within 500 feet of a residential zone, they got to get a hardship first before they can even apply for a special exception and site plan approval. So I think you need to think about that. Are these unintended consequences of the draft that we have? The purpose of the hearings is to hear from a variety of people from different perspectives on how you might be able to improve that. I think you need to think about how far you want to go in terms of applying that. I talked with Michelle about this notion of that every parking lot over 50 spaces has to go, in the I-zone, has to go to a special exception permit. I said before, can't understand that. She and I were talking about the possibility you might want to consider eliminating that provision, just the parking lots. So that means 50 parking spaces. So if you have 49 parking spaces, you want to add on 2 parking spaces, you might kick into a special exception. 50-car parking lots are really small. I just can't see applying a special exception unless you want to spend a lot more time out of public hearings, as everyone's evaluating the 14 review criteria for special exception uses. With respect to manufacturing, she and I discussed that anything over, I think over 40,000 square feet, I think it said, yeah, it does. It says 40,000 square feet. Any manufacturing enterprise. Let me give you an example. 22nd largest taxpayer in town is Shepherd Pola, the Shepherd New Way tobacco facility at 200 Sullivan Avenue. That particular use, they've been putting on small incremental additions to meet the needs of their operations. They come in for a 5,000 square foot addition. They would have to go for a special exception instead of permitted by right. They have to come in for a special exception because they're already over 40,000 square feet. If they were at 38,000 square feet and they want to put a 5,000 square foot expansion on or bigger, they'd also would have to be a special exception and have to go through that process. They've been here for how long? And what do they do for the community? They do tons to give back to the community. I don't think that's fair to them. Or anyone else who has twin manufacturing. We just did an addition for them on Chapel Road. If they were to do another expansion at all, and they're not near residential right there, why would they have to, because they're over 40,000 square feet, or it kicks it over 40,000 square feet, they'd have to come for a special exception every time? Why do we want to do that to the businesses? With respect to the 75-foot buffer, I just want to reiterate, this one point I want to reiterate from prior testimony, and that's that if you've already established a buffer, it's on the records. People bought property knowing it was a 50-foot buffer, such as Dyco and all those businesses down that area that already and recently approved building lots, such as those on 6 lots on the south side of South Satellite Road, where there's already a buffer established at the South Windsor Woods to the south, and then they already have a buffer on these lots of 50 feet, so that's a 75-foot buffer already, and to impose another 25 feet in these narrow lots, they're not deep, you're just taking out 25 feet of the depth of the building. It's been tough enough for them to find people to buy those lots. I think it would make it increasingly more difficult. So I think you need to think about that. And places like Dyco, they can't expand their building in the back if you impose a 75-foot buffer. They bought it with 50-foot buffer. I think you should stick with it. And if you look at, I got from Mary Huda, I got a list of the top 25 taxpayers in this town. Without their taxes, our taxes would be a lot higher. And we're going to be going through a period right now where, the first time in years, we're going to be going through a period of increased taxation. We all know that this year, and it's probably going for the next foreseeable years. We're going to get hit with a pretty sizable tax increase if you read the papers about what the suggested amounts are for Board of Ed and for general government. We need to have some large businesses come in and expansions. We need to have a lot of medium-sized businesses expanding and a lot of small businesses expanding. Without those, you're never going to avoid tax increases on commercial and residential taxpayers, and you're not going to avoid cuts in services and personnel. I've been through that. I worked in government for 10 years, and it can get pretty ugly. Just take a minute, just go through the top taxpayers, if I may, of those large industrial-type buildings. Aldi Inc. is number 2 in town, right after Connecticut Light and Power, which, of course, has big substations and lines all over the place. Aldi's number 2. You have number 4, FedEx, which is number 4, but if you combine it with their package handling system is number 24. They kick back up to number 2. They exceed Aldi, which is now number 2. Huge impact on the tax base, a grand list. If you look at DST, what I call DST output, we did that project in the 2 expansions of it, now called Broadridge, down in the CD zone. They are number 7. If you look at next one down, Mobis, division of Hyundai, on Sullivan Avenue near Route 5. They're the 12th largest taxpayer in the town. You look at Skinnell's Amazon facility down at Junction I-291 and Route 30 and Route 5. Right there, you find that they're number 13 on our tax base. Then you go down to Coca-Cola, recently opened, did that one as well. That's number 15. If you look at Macy's, which has been around for a long time, was G. Fox Warehouse, that is actually number, I believe, 16. The Home Depot, new facility, is number 17. If you look at, I mentioned Shepherd Pola is number 22. That's the 200 Sullivan Avenue facility. I mentioned already FedEx Ground. Rex Lumber Company, big building on Sullivan Avenue, is number 23. So just want to bring that to your attention. Huge part of our tax base are these large buildings, and I don't want to see unintended consequences. Do what you think is appropriate, of course. It's your decision, but I think you should fully understand what impact it may have on existing businesses and what decisions they may make once they find out what those unintended or those intended or unintended consequences are. Because if they've invested heavily in this town, they're going to do what they have to do. And I have not had any conversation with anyone about doing anything, but they're going to do what they have to do to protect their investment. So by all means, and I've had no conversation with any of them about this, but by all means, think about your regulations that draft February. It sounded like the commission was receptive to some changes. Make the appropriate changes, whatever you think they are, but definitely look at making some changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the proposed text amendment?
I'm already signed in. Steve Gratch, resident, South Windsor. I was just listening to a lot of the things that Peter was saying, and most of those properties he mentioned, anything that's newer, currently is under a tax abatement, so there is no revenue coming in. So when you're pushing 200, 300, 400, 500 trucks on the road, it uses up town resources that the residents pay for, taxes go up. We just went out $35 million for road repair in this town. Taxpayers eventually will pay for that, not tax someday as a promise. The circumstances he was saying about pushing. Look, the idea is to protect the residents and the home values in this community, and that's why you're all sitting here. This gentleman, other gentlemen, make money from it. They're going to come here, they're going to say whatever they want to get what they want, but it's not in the best interest of this town. And it just keeps going on and on and on. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the text amendment changes? Please step forward.
Hi, Jessica Vogelsang, Hilton Drive, South Windsor. I'm already signed in. Wow. I need another 2 weeks to prepare to answer to all of that new information. But let me organize some thoughts real quick here. I don't want to rehash everything that was said in the last two meetings either, but I would like to highlight a couple of things. And the first one that just hit me is there's two things that are at odds here, and one of them seems to be people who are extremely concerned with the money and the tax base and what the big dollar people are going to do, who I agree are probably getting abatements right now. That's on my list too as well, research. But I'd like to point out some, versus the quality of life and what the people who are here and have bought houses and have put money into those houses, maybe not $22 million and the millions of dollars that some of these other businesses are, but they also bought houses and lands in places that had regulations and zoning and intended purposes for what they would be abutted against. Many of that, us included, were under the impression that a lot of that was wetlands along there and that there wouldn't be industrial, large-scale industrial development like that there. So while I have sympathy for the large corporations that are going to have to perhaps jump through a few extra hoops to be able to do this, my true compassion lies with the people who have houses and have invested probably a greater percentage part of what their income and investments are in houses which might be next to these monstrosities now. So there's one. I'd like to talk a little bit about what was addressed in the previous hearings. My concerns with noise and traffic. I noticed that some of these are, there's 3 designations. There's may not do 24 hours, they'll run 9 to 5, Monday through Wednesday. Then there's the freight where they're gonna be coming in and out 24/7 all the time, lots of trucks. And then there's one in the middle that, well, they might be having 24/7 trucks and traffic open hours. My concern addresses a broader thing that I think some of these regulations need to have even tougher teeth in it. I saw a lot of may have to come back rather than will come back, may be required to rather than we will require them to. And one of those I would think would be if they come out of compliance in what their traffic regulations are, that they would be able to bring the site back into compliance. What is a time frame for the corporation who owns this to come back into compliance? What are the penalties if they don't bring it back into compliance? It's been mentioned here, Home Depot as one of the largest taxpayers. And if I remember correctly, the experts told us that that train and the railroads would not interfere with the traffic over there or that part of town. Well, the experts were wrong. And so where are the teeth in this that if the experts say what they want to get these in and bring in other experts, and it's my understanding that the landowners that are trying to work on the court case in the warehouses can't even find their own experts to come in and contradict this because it's such a closed community that nobody wants to speak against this because they may not get future employment. So I don't see enough teeth in some of these that are able to protect homeowners' quality of life. I'm sensitive to the fact that yes, you have to have money, yes, you have to have services, but people are not going to want to live here, and they're not going to want to take advantages of any of the services that are here if there's not a quality of life. It's been brought up previous that Mobus is one of the highest taxpayers up there. We heard from the experts that the noise from that was not going to impact the historic district or East Windsor Hill. I've been up there. Many of the town councilors and probably people on this committee have been up there. You can't sit in people's backyards of that and have barbecues without the noise from the truck traffic and Route 5 and Sullivan Avenue. And it was, this won't be that loud, you're far enough away from it. So my concern is when people come in and say that, like South Windsor Woods, we'll have a minimum amount of increase to our school districts, and then the experts come back and say, well, it wasn't the formula, it wasn't our expert opinion that made that error. Here we are again, having to build another school, having to be able to have overcrowded already because the experts told us one thing and came out wrong. So if anything, I so appreciate not only the fact that you've given me the extra time to research some of this, and I've learned a lot more about zoning than I ever thought I would. I appreciate all the time and energy that you put into it, but I think that for the past 37 years, things have been looked at one way, and there's been an open door and a very friendliness. And perhaps we are reaching the end of the cycle of when that mindset should happen. So I handed out earlier. One of the things that I love that I heard from one of the speakers a week or two ago was that you zone for what you want, and that really, really struck with me. Working over at Wood Memorial Library, I can see a lot of the previous planning documents, zoning documents. I've looked at the stuff that was supposed to go in on the Talbot Road. It's absolutely nothing like what the people envisioned it 20, 30, 40 years ago when they thought that would be an industrial area. And I invite you to come and look at some of those things over at Wood Library of what the people intended when they thought industry would be different than what it is today. So in the spirit of zone for what you want, Wood Memorial Library is doing a exhibit, and it's called South Windsor's Contributions to Space. This is a 2-year project that has been done with a high school senior, as well as a lot of local South Windsor engineers and basically rocket scientists, as well as those from the surrounding areas. From 1965 to 2010, the west side of Route 5, Governor's Highway, had Pratt & Whitney, which then later became, I believe, International Fuel Cells, which later became UTC Power. At those, it was a research, development, and manufacturing of fuel cells. This was brought in to our town a group of the best and the brightest for high-paying jobs. They worked on helping NASA explore space, and that's what this exhibit will be at and show. When we zone for what we want, this is the type of thing I would hope that we're thinking in the future. I'm extremely proud that we've put all this together. I'm extremely proud to go to the press and to the rest of Connecticut and tout South Windsor's contributions to space and how we have done that. I shudder to think what I'm going to be talking about in 20, 30 years that may be South Windsor's contribution to the area. And it scares me to think that I would have to be motivated or proud to do an exhibit highlighting our role as the distribution and freight hub for the Northeast. So when we're thinking about the planning and zoning, when we're thinking about what we want to bring to town, when we're thinking about what we're leaving not only for the people that are here now, but the people that will be here after 1965, 75, 85, 95, I'd like to leave them a legacy that we zoned for what we wanted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding the text amendment? Please step forward.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Yeah, my name's Robert Stoddard. She's talking about railroads and how Home Depot said that they weren't gonna hurt the roads of trying to get down the street. Is that right? Well, it is affecting it. One day I had to run to the dentist's office, or I'll put it, drive to the dentist's office. I had, you know, I mean, I'm sitting here. Half the cars were making U-turns and leaving. I took a turn because I'm late for my appointment almost, just to go to the dentist's office. You know, now, to change the subject or not, this property here is next to McDonald's. Is next to McDonald's? It is. Okay. I can walk out. Walk through woods to McDonald's. It would take me longer to drive around to McDonald's than it would take me to walk to McDonald's. We had her speaking about the Connecticut River, about wildlife. You know, I love my birds. I love my deer that walk through my woods. No, I can't call them my woods, but, you know, I see people walking through these woods. You know? So consideration of this building, what she's talking about, what, you know, but she's for it, or is she against it? You know, I mean, I heard her speak. It sounds like she wants it, but she don't want it. She don't want the traffic headaches. That's it, traffic headaches. You know, because I drive up and down recently doing my homework on buildings. Okay, we'll take Pleasant Valley Road. What's the speed limit? No help. Okay, 35 miles an hour. From, I say 35, maybe it goes down to 30 in areas. But from the mall all the way down Pleasant Valley Road, I'm looking for signs of trucks. You know, should I be driving a tractor trailer down here, box trucks or whatever? No signs. Good, okay. But the thing is that now I got somebody behind me in a 350 pushing me, and I'm doing 30 miles an hour. You know, so I think we need, I hate to say it, I mean, hey, I know because I was driving down it, I'm doing research on these streets. Pleasant Valley and Governor's Highway, where I live in between. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding the PZC-sponsored text amendment? Hearing and seeing none, we'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Carey.
I don't think I have anything else from the last time. You know,
You're all set?
yeah, the last time was the one thing I wanted to get rid of the solar panel,
Okay.
but other than that, I'm okay.
Commissioner Dexter?
I don't have any further comments.
Commissioner Foley?
I have no further comment.
Commissioner Cavagno?
No comments to repeat.
Commissioner Viteri?
No further comments.
Okay.
Chairman Passaconis, you have a letter to read into the record.
Okay, I have a few I didn't get to express.
You have a letter to read into the record?
Oh, okay. Pardon me. Let's see what we got.
So sorry. This is a letter from Wei Zhang, sent at 125 Cody Circle, sent to PZC commissioners and town staff. I want to express my gratitude for the tremendous effort and countless hours you have spent developing the new text amendment of the zoning regulations. After so many years of rapid development, South Windsor has reached a turning point where the direction of our town's future will be largely guided by your work. Your efforts will set our town on the right path, and I am thankful for your dedication to serving our community. As a 13-year resident of South Windsor, I strongly support this text amendment, but I do have some comments I would like to make. During the previous public hearings, I did not hear much mentioned of the Buckland Road Gateway Zone. While I don't know the circumstances surrounding the Gateway Zone regulations passage, I think it would be a good reference for those industrial zones abutting residential areas. Could you extend the Gateway Zone regulations to other areas that are actually more populated than the Buckland Road area? For example, Section 4211F in the current regulations prohibits overnight operation of noise-generating activities like loading, trash removal, and truck operation. Could the same requirements be added to the text amendment for industrial zones abutting residential homes? I believe residents living in other parts of the town deserve the same protection as those in the Gateway Zone. Another comment concerns the balance between property tax and development. In the last meeting, someone said you cannot have both low taxes and low development. However, the truth is that we have neither of them. What we have now are high taxes and more development. South Windsor's mill rate is already in the top 5 among the towns in the Hartford area, and we don't see any contribution to our tax reduction from the already developed mega warehouses in town. Where did the money go? Or do we really get much tax revenue from these developments? Thank you again for your hard work on this important issue. I hope that my comments will be helpful as you continue to develop and refine the text amendment. Best regards, Wei Zhang, 125 Cody Circle.
Thank you very much. Okay. As far as my comments, I'll just go over a few of the issues that we've had brought before us. And I agree that the berm should not impede the wildlife. There was discussion about the berm slopes, and the slopes that we had incorporated into the regulations came from recommendations from our landscape architect. The commission engaged to review our regulations and proposals and the maintenance of those slopes. I wouldn't mind a little bit of flexibility in the how steep the slopes are, but we'll talk about it more in deliberations. The increased buffer. It would be great if the buffer distance could be regulated by the activity being buffered. Say pedestrian vehicles, a 50-foot buffer similar to what we have now. Trailer trucks, 75 to 100-foot buffer. There is a provision right now in the current proposal that would allow the buffers to stay the same 50 feet. I think that's important that the current people or current businesses that go under that regulation have that ability. But for new businesses, we have to look at that. We heard testimony about some of the other towns having a 100-foot buffer or 75-foot buffer. East Windsor, Glastonbury, all stuff we got to take into account. The parking table concerns, specifically the overlap between shifts. There's been some talk that maybe our proposed regulations are excessive with the parking. But as an example, if you have a business that has 200 vehicles on the first shift, and they have 150 vehicles on the second shift, and all those workers are expected to be in the building at the same time, and how many parking spaces do we need? You know, by one way, we would need as many vehicles as, or as many parking spaces as the highest shift, plus 20% for overflow. That would be, I believe, 240 parking spaces. When, if you have both shifts and they all have the cars that get them to work, and we are a society where we drive ourselves to work. We don't typically do a lot of carpooling. There's some people that do it, and great, you know, but with our rights and everything, everybody wants the right to drive to work. So if everybody drives to work, that could be 350 cars parked where our future regulations could only say 240 are needed. So these are things that we've really got to look at seriously, so we're not creating issues either. Another issue that we've talked about, and Commissioner Carey just reminded me about, is screening of rooftop solar panels. The reason a lot of times we make regulations is because we're addressing problems that we have throughout town. I haven't heard any problems with solar being on rooftops. And I'd hate to really put regulations in there that might make or might be detrimental to solar. So at this time, not seeing a problem, I'm not in favor of screening solar on rooftops. I've heard some input about bollards. And I really feel that it's important that we maintain our aesthetics in town. I've been through a lot of towns, and I've been through South Windsor, and I've seen what happens at businesses that don't have bollards that we feel that they should have. And that's why it's in the regulations. And when there's accidents that hit a building, that building's never the same. It never gets, or seldom gets repaired to look new, if it gets repaired at all. And I'm not in favor of getting rid of bollards. There's a lot of businesses that already have them, and they seem to be working out fine. So that's one thing I wouldn't change. As far as the 40,000 square foot footprint of a building, and that being a point generating to special exception, I would just like to make a distinction between a 40,000 square foot footprint and a 40,000 square foot building, because I think it would be more important to have it a 40,000 square foot footprint, because a building could have multi-levels. And if you're talking about square footage, that's not doing justice to a building that might have a 20,000 square foot footprint, but be a 40,000 square foot building or 60,000 square foot building, multi-level. Some of the other comments that have been voiced during the public hearing, the special exception uses driving up the cost for developers, creating longer commission meetings. I'm not worried about creating longer commission meetings. And developers being concerned about no guarantee of approval. I understand what they're saying. But I do think that the changes that we've proposed are important. concerns that the regulations don't go far enough to address noise, light, diesel pollution associated with warehouses. All tough issues to deal with. I believe Public Health Department takes care of the noise issues now, correct, Jeff? The light and diesel pollution, those are very tough issues. And light issues throughout town are an issue, because with all the thefts of catalytic converters, you drive down like Route 5 now, and it just seems there's so many businesses that have gone up and above the regulated lighting, and now they have these big spotlights trying to light up their whole land. It's really gotten crazy out there. I don't know if other people have noticed, but I had mentioned to Michelle the other day, what's our, the microphone place up on Pleasant Valley? Telefunken, thank you. You come up Pleasant Valley now and you get halfway up Pleasant Valley and you see these two lights to the left of the signal lights. And they're shining at you, and they're like this. They're not straight across like headlights, but they're coming at you bright as headlights. And you get up to the intersection, and they have all these new spotlights, which weren't there before, but they light up the whole area. Light is an issue. Was talk about commercial and residential zones should be separated by a roadway. And yes, we were dealing with a town that wasn't totally developed with their roadways. That would be a great idea to do. But when you have our zones that have been in existence probably much longer than I've been on this earth, it's tough to move in a whoops. There was some testimony that industrial buildings should be built to accommodate solar panels. And I'm not sure if that's really an issue, because I've seen a lot of buildings that have already been built. And you look at aerial views now, and they've got solar panels on them. And I don't know if our schools were designed for that, but I believe schools have them on them. Town buildings have them on them, and they were built prior to the solar being an issue. So again, that one's a tough one for me to change or regulate. There are a few other things that was brought up by the public. Wanting the 100-foot buffer. We've had conversation and testimony about the difference between distribution centers and warehouses. As far as a lot of times these terms are used interchangeably or together. And if that's the case, I would be in favor of the warehouses also having the 500-foot limit on them, like the distribution centers and the other uses under that category. I might be in the minority, which is fine. But as Merrick had said, we should zone for what we want. And right now, we do have a plethora of warehouses. I wish we could say, bring manufacturing, more manufacturing. But you tend to get what is driven by the economy. And right now, everything is a warehouse, whether distribution center, warehouse. That's what the big game in town is right now. So I wouldn't want to, by making warehouses the only thing that didn't need a 500-foot area from residential, that would actually be encouraging more warehouse development. So that, I think that's something we have to look at. I think that's about all I have for comments at this time. So right now, I'm going to turn to commissioners and see if there's any reason we should keep this public hearing open or we should close the public hearing. Town staff? Okay. So it seems like everybody's ready to have this public hearing closed. So I will close this public hearing at 8:34 p.m. And this will be on a future agenda for action and deliberation. Thank you. Okay, where is that agenda? At this time, I'll call our regular meeting to order for the Planning and Zoning for April 11th, 2023. And our first item on our agenda is public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on something that is not on our agenda tonight? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none.
I forgot to tell you when I was expounding our exhibit that it opens and the forum with the space engineers will be this Sunday. So if you'd like to hear what some of the South Windsor residents have done in the Apollo missions, I invite you to come down.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public participation? Hearing and seeing none. Our first item on our agenda is our minutes. I reviewed the minutes. I didn't find any issues. There were a couple things that Merrick Kozakowski had said, and I'm not sure if it was a cut and paste issue, but they weren't anything that would have me concerned about having them approved as they are. So if nobody has any concerns, we can adopt those minutes by consensus. Agreed? Okay. We'll move into new business. Our first is application 23-09P Pelletier Major Home Occupation Renewal. Is there anybody here from Pelletier tonight? Jeff, I had talked with Michelle, and since this had been a reoccurring renewal, I didn't have a problem with moving forward with it. Do you have a report on this?
I do. This application is a request for a renewal of a 5-year major home occupation permit to continue operating a hair salon at 549 Ellington Road, rural residential zone. The salon was first approved in 1997 and renewed in 2002, in 2008, 2013, and again in 2018. We have not received any complaints about this home occupation. The business operates 5 days a week, varying hours between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. by appointment. The existing house is served by public sewer and water. There currently is an in-law apartment approved above the garage as well. The applicant received WPCA approval for the sewer connection for the business in April 2nd of 2013. The applicant has 4 part-time employees, including her daughter, who has a massage therapy license. The applicant had a similar situation at her 2008 renewals. The site has 2 curb cuts. The parking requirement is met within the existing driveway. There is a significant amount of space available for parking on site. Refuse collection is handled privately. The applicant has a 2-square-foot sign which is permitted by the regulations. If renewed, the applicant will be required to return to this commission for renewal upon expiration of the 5-year permit period. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Move we approve application 2309P, Pelletier MHO renewal. This is the right one, yes. This approval is subject to the following conditions. Point 1, the business must be operated by the homeowner. Point 2, the permit will expire on April 11th, 2028, and will be renewed at that time if the home occupation is to continue. And point 3, refuse from the business cannot be disposed of with residential refuse. Adequate arrangements must be made for business refuse disposal.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, our next item on our business is application 23-12P, Tees Auto temporary and conditional renewal. Do we have a staff report on that?
I do. The request is for a renewal of a 2-year temporary and conditional permit for the display of 4 automobiles for sale at Tees Auto Service on the corner of Ellington Road and Pleasant Valley Road, across from the 7-Eleven store. This is a restricted commercial zone. This application was originally granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals in February 1986 to allow 2 vehicles for sale and renewed by this commission every 2 years since. The October 2010 Planning and Zoning Commission approval allowed the applicant to increase the number of vehicles for sale to 4 vehicles. The original ZBA approval and earlier PZC approvals included 3 conditions. 1, the permit is restricted to 2 automobiles and excludes vans or trucks. The cars are no closer than 12 feet from the corner. No more than 12 cars in a single row with 2 other cars making a second row, as shown in the diagram that was submitted, are to be parked from the station to Pleasant Valley Road. This includes the automobiles for sale. Also, there will be no parking at any time in the front area of the parking lot. The regulations state that temporary and conditional permits may be granted by the commission for a use if the public convenience and welfare will be substantially served and the appropriate use of neighboring property will not be substantially or permanently injured, and traffic and other hazards will not result from such use. If this application is approved, the planning department has no modifications to recommend. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, with this application, they did submit a plan which details everything that was included with the approval conditions. So commissioners, what's your pleasure? Commissioner Carey.
Sure. I move that we approve Project T Auto Service Application Number 23-12P. Approval is subject to the following conditions. One, this permit is for a 2-year maximum period. This permit is restricted to 4 vehicles for sale with a standard auto marker and excludes vans or trucks. The cars are to be no closer than 12 feet from the corner, no more than 12 cars in a single row with 2 other cars making a second row, as shown in the diagram submitted, are to be parked from the station to Pleasant Valley Road. This includes the automobiles for sale. And 4, there will be no parking at any time in the front area of the parking lot, Friends, Triangle, and near the dumpster. The permit will expire in 2 years, April 11th, 2025, and will have to be reviewed at that time.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, our next business is application 23-10P, Kusan Automotive Enterprises. Jeff, is there any additional staff report, or are you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. Commissioners,
I would like to make a motion to approve application 23-10P, Cusson Automotive Enterprises, which is a request for a zone change of 9.92 acres of land from general commercial to industrial for property located at 753 John Fitch Boulevard. Approval conditions include, number 1, Planning and Zoning Commission finds that the zone change is in conformance with the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. Number 2, the effective date of the zone change is April 30th, 2023. And number 3, within 90 days, by July 29th, 2023, a zone change map with an A2 certification must be filed on the land records, showing all boundary lines and the acreage of the land where the zone change was granted. The map shall be drawn in accordance with the rules and regulations of the State Board of Registration for professionals, engineers, and land surveyors, and shall be stamped and signed by a registered land surveyor. The zone change map must be submitted on black and white Mylars with this approval letter thereon, together with 3 blueprint copies of the zone change.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussions, questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I don't see any bonds. We do have one application officially received, which was South Windsor Wellness Center. Is there any old business, Jeff, or?
No.
Okay. We do have an executive session. So if,
Chairman Patsakonis, you do have the caucus room for your executive session tonight.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
So what we are going to do, we need a motion to go into executive session. So,
I move that we go into executive session.
and who is going to be invited into that executive session?
the 6 commissioners and
Jeff Folger.
Jeff Folger, and that's it, right?
Actually, I think Jeff Doolittle.
And,
Doolittle.
and Jeff Doolittle?
Well,
Or
Jeff Doolittle before Jeff Folger.
instead of Jeff Folger?
Yeah.
We had the wrong Jeff. Thank you. Is there, legal is, of course, invited also.
Right.
Jeff, is that our legal only, or is it, I believe it's just our.
I believe it's just our legal.
Okay.
think
And
it's by
then, well, we have that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. I just want to make the public aware that after that executive session, we'll come back into our meeting, and then we will be adjourning at that point. So we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we need a motion to come out of executive session.
I make a motion to come out of executive session and to go back into our regular meeting with an amendment to the agenda to discuss the related executive session issue.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so now we need an amendment, correct?
I motion that the commission has reviewed the concept off-site sidewalk plan by Design Professionals, sheet C-SW1, dated January 25th, 2023, revised February 3rd, 2023, and February 13th, 2023, and has received recently by the town. In accordance with the plan to resolve this issue, the commission is voting in good faith to accept and resolve the off-site sidewalk plan and send it to the Connecticut Department of Transportation for an independent review of this sidewalk plan.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Let the record reflect the vote was unanimous. Okay, if we have no further business tonight, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Good night.